everyone, it's Avril here again. Can I just ask any of you that are on here live, if you're still here, to let me know if you can hear this, because this is take two. For those of you who missed the first 10 minutes, there was absolutely no sound. So I'm giving it a go again, and I'm waiting to see if there is anybody here still left here who's live. And if you just let me know you can hear, that would be awesome. You know, it's so annoying. I was so in my flow there. Hopefully it won't take me long to get back into the flow. Oh, brilliant. Hi, Eileen. Thank you. I'm so glad you can hear me. I have no idea what was wrong with that. But anyway, we're all sorted and we're all good. Now, I have no idea where to start now because, oh yeah, there we go. Back at the beginning, rewind. So for those of, hi, Kirsten, good to see you. Oh, I know it is really annoying, but never mind. I'm getting used to these little tech gremlins, and to be honest, Eileen, they're probably not affecting me anywhere near how they would have affected me a year ago when I started doing some Facebook Lives. Now I just kind of, okay, well, it's just a little bit techie stuff and I'm just going to roll with it. Yeah, it wasn't a short one this month, Kirsten. It was technical issues. So, and thankfully I managed to see some messages to say that nobody could hear me. Otherwise, it would have just been without any sound. Anyway, so good to be back, and I'm glad you all can hear me. So I'll give it a few seconds. I'm not going to give it as long as I initially did to see if others are joining us. But just a reminder that this month I'm chatting about self-sabotage, and that's because of a question that was posted in the group around self-sabotage. So this is in answer to Laura's question. I think I've tagged you, Laura, in the feed. I know you can't be here today because you've got stuff going on, and that's absolutely fine. You can listen to this in the replay, of course. And I hope what I share with you today helps you and everybody else in the group. And please remember, whilst I'm answering this question for Laura and sharing a bit of my own sight and my own insight that I had around self-sabotage, you're welcome to pop up in the feed your own questions, whether that's around self-sabotage or something completely different. I really don't mind. And if I have time, because well, I was planning to be here till 11, but because I had to stop and restart, I'll take it just past 11. So I'll be here for the whole hour, because that's what I'm here for, an hour every month to do this Q&A. So if you've got questions and I have time, I will absolutely answer them. Robert, I am so glad you can hear me this time. It wasn't you, it was me. Something going on with the technology, the joys. So, so let's see who is all here. We've got Robert, we've got Kirsten, we've got Adrian, we've got Eileen. It's so good to have you. And I'm sure what I share today will be helpful. And let's see if anybody else is jumping on board. I know a lot of people are actually watching the Q&As on replay, so that's fine. But it's just so nice to know there's people in the room with me, so I'm not talking to just a camera all by myself. So self-sabotage. I think the best way to approach this is to probably explain what happens when we go into that place of self-sabotage, what we're actually doing. So for you, Laura, this will be helpful in relation to, I think what you said in your question was that there's something that you want to do, and you're I'm not sure if these were your exact words, but you're really looking forward to do it. It's something you've always wanted to do, and you've got the opportunity to do it now. But what's happening, you're putting off doing whatever it is that you need to do in order for you to take that next step. And that in itself is a typical example of what we would call self-sabotage. Whether that's in relation to something that we want to do, i.e., sign up for a college course, or learn to swim, or whatever it might be, or even lose weight, or exercise. That's my biggest one, is exercise. Or exercise, it shows up, the opportunity presents itself, or the thought comes through us. We have this idea that we'd really like to do this thing. Then we get everything lined up in order to make that happen. And then just as we're about to take a step forward, we start doing things that what we perceive as being self-sabotage in order to stop us from doing those things. And that often happens because what we tend to do when we're in that moment, so we have this idea, we have this thought or this opportunity, and when we're at our best around that thought or idea, when our thinking is at its highest around that thought or around that idea, what we do is we project into the future, and we see ourselves or imagine ourselves or just get a sense of ourselves in the future doing that thing. So, I maybe want to do some exercise. So buy myself, this is true by the way, buy myself a nice new yoga mat, and I get the room all set up. So it's really easy for me to go into that room and just do the yoga. Everything's lined up. So I'm sat on the couch the night before, I've got the room set up the night before, and in my head I'm like, right, I'm going to get up in the morning, and the first thing I'm going to do is go into that room and do a couple of sun salutations or whatever it might be. And so on the sofa at night, I'm imagining myself in the morning getting up and doing the yoga. Then immediately what begins to happen is, outside of my awareness, some thought kicks in about the last time I made a plan to go do that yoga in the morning, and I was tired in the morning. And so I jump back into the past, and then I start remembering all the times that I didn't do it or whatever it was. And I end up, or we end up, on a yo-yo of yo-yoing into the future and into the past, into the future, into the past. So our awareness isn't in the moment where I'm just here on the sofa watching the TV. My awareness, I'm so tied up in thinking around this thing in the future, and all my experiences from the past around attempting to do that thing in the future. Now, this happens completely most of the time out with our consciousness. We are not aware that we do this. We are completely not aware that we do this. And what makes it worse is that when it's really big things in our life, so the getting up in the morning and doing the yoga is just a little thing. But when it's really big things in life, making big life changes, like going for a new job, or going for a promotion at work, or whatever's big for you. At the moment I can't think about, or signing up for a college course, or retraining to do something different, or just putting yourself out there in a different way. What happens is we project ourselves into the future and try and imagine ourselves doing that thing, and then unconsciously our brain goes back through all our old memories, all our old experiences, all the times where we've maybe not achieved something, or we've not felt good enough. It basically goes searching back to all the old things that have stopped us in the past before, and projects that onto this future. And then suddenly that thing that showed up that we thought, oh, I'd really love to do this, and that's a great idea. Imagine ourselves in the future, and instead of feeling good about it, we've added all this meaning from all the beliefs and all the past experiences that we've had. We've added all this meaning to this future event that hasn't happened yet. And instead of thinking about that future event with excitement, we start to think about it with dread. So what we tend to do instead is we talk ourselves out of it. Whether we are consciously aware of this or not, we somehow talk ourselves out of it. So we look at our diary and think, actually, I've not got time to fit that in there. Oh, I didn't get to bed till 11 o'clock and I need at least 8 hours sleep in the morning. So we unconsciously or consciously, and to use the word, we self-sabotage. And it's a natural thing that we do. And this is really important that we all start to become more aware that this concept, I'm using inverted commas here, this idea of self-sabotage isn't a bad thing. You know, and this was my big insight, my massive insight, in fact, because I used to call myself the world's best self-sabotager. You know, I would sabotage relationships. You know, when things were going good, somehow I would find a way to, you know, make something bad happen. You know, when my career was going good, I'd somehow managed to self-sabotage that. There was always something that, and I used to think to myself, what is wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? You know, and spent years and years trying to fix what I thought was wrong with me and fix the parts of me that were broken, that were causing me to self-sabotage. But at that time, what I didn't realise, and I see this in the hundreds, thousands of clients that I work with, is, you know, what I didn't realise and what my clients don't realise is that we're not broken. And if we're not broken, there's nothing within us that needs to be fixed. So for me, this insight, as I deepened my understanding of that through the work that I do, and that awareness of, well, if I'm not broken and if there's nothing that needs to be fixed, then surely self-sabotage isn't something that I need to fix or do anything about. And as I began to look at self-sabotage in that way, I started to actually see self-sabotage not as something that was unhelpful in my life, but something that was taking care of me, something that was looking after me. And looking after me from the point of view of how my brain works, how the design of the human brain actually operates. So somewhere deep inside, you know, there was maybe something bigger than me guiding me with ideas or things that I want to do, but my brain, which is our computer, that drives all the programs that we run. So my brain, the way in which it was set up in a way to always protect me. So as I began to deepen my understanding about self-sabotage, I actually started to realise that it is a form of self-protection, because what actually is going on is that when all this stuff shows up to pull us back from us stepping outside our comfort zone, all the stuff that's showing up is just our brain's way of saying, remember, here, you're safe. You know, if you stay here, you're safe. You're not at risk. You know, you'll be protected here. Out there, you don't know. Out there, you don't know what's going to happen, but we know, based on all the past experiences that you have, if you stay here and keep things the way they've always been, you know, and in my case, self-sabotage in relationships or jobs, I, to me, that's how that always was. So anytime I tried to do something different, it was taking me out of my comfort zone and making me feel vulnerable. So my brain, the lower part of our brain, our amygdala, the bit that keeps the fight or flight response bit, the bit that kind of protects us when we step out of our comfort zone, pulls us back and pulls us back onto an old neural pathway, if you want to call it, an old program that we've just been so comfortable running for years and years and years to protect us. It's not because we're purposely trying to cause ourselves, you know, keep ourselves stuck or hold ourselves back. It's actually, I now see self-sabotage as a really compassionate thing that I do for myself, because it's my brain's way of protecting myself. However, that deeper part of me, the spiritual part, the higher wisdom, whatever you want to call it, my connection to source, or whatever you want to call it, knows that I'm always going to be okay. And it also knows that this part of my brain is just protecting me. And the logical part of my brain, the higher thinking, that will kick in and start helping me to figure it out, as long as I don't allow myself to get stuck back in that place. And it's not that I need to fix it. It's not that you need to fix self-sabotage, because you actually don't. You know, providing you have an awareness of what's going on. Oh, this thing that I'm doing is just an old thing that I used to do in order to keep me safe. And I don't need to do anything about it, because it eventually will correct itself. It's only when we start meddling with it and trying to fix it, or projecting so far into the future and imagining all worst case scenarios, that this part gets stronger and stronger and more powerful, and then we become overwhelmed with fear and doubt, that we then get stuck. But as long as we don't meddle with it and do anything with it, and we begin to understand that that's just part of us protecting ourselves, you know, it's kind of like, it's like a smoker, you know, when they know their highest self knows that the best thing for them to be is a non-smoker. The healthiest and best thing for them to be is a non-smoker. But they have spent so much of their lives as a smoker, and using probably cigarettes as a way to help them be calm or help them relax. You know, a smoker once, and I used to smoke, and a smoker once said to me, you know, cigarettes are like my best friend. They're always there when I need them. So for a smoker to stop smoking and imagine themselves without their best friend in the future, absolutely, they're going to self-sabotage and go back and have the cigarette. You know, and that's exactly how our brain works. It wants to pull us always back and keep us safe. It just wants, that's what it's designed to do. It wants to pull us back and keep us safe. But we have the ability within us to create a new pathway. But we can only do that when we stop adding meaning into that old pathway, when we stop living in that old pathway inside ourselves, and we slow everything down and we just see it for what it is. So I hope this is making sense. I'd love to hear any of your comments around this. So I guess for me, and Laura, when you listen to this later, I hope you find this helpful. I guess for me, my big insight came and my big shift in relation to self-sabotage came when I started to see self-sabotage as just a part of me that wanted to protect me and keep me safe, because there was this unknown part that I was stepping into, that I was being guided to go into, that my brain didn't have any reference of, or maybe my brain did have a reference of it, but the reference that had of it was all the past experiences or the past times that it didn't work out, or all the past things that were tied up in old stories about not being good enough or not being intelligent enough, or whatever the past stories were, or attractive enough or thin enough or fit enough, whatever those stories were. That was the only reference my brain had. But when your brain starts to create new references, then you don't have to do anything about the self-sabotage, because it begins to dissolve all by itself. But that can only happen when you can sit back into awareness and start to see self-sabotage for what it is. It's something, it's not something that happens, it's not behavior that happens on the outside. It's the meaning that you make in the moment on the inside that's created this neural pathway, this lower level thinking that's come from that lower part of your brain that keeps you safe and keeps you protected. Well, if I don't do that, if I stay here in this place, I'm safe. If I don't speak up, then no one can call me out on what I'm saying, or if I don't speak my truth, then nobody will be angry at me. So that's the best place for me to stay, because if I speak my truth and people get angry, then that makes me vulnerable and scared. So that part of my brain will keep me here and keep me safe. But when you start speaking your truth, for example, and showing up in whatever way it is that you want to show up for you, and creating a new pathway, then that old pattern begins to just dissolve away. It doesn't go away forever. At the weekend, I was describing to someone, it becomes like a ghost pathway. In fact, was it the weekend or yesterday? I don't know. Whether it was my students or clients yesterday, I was describing this idea of, in our brains, we can never get rid of, our thinking and our beliefs from the past. We can't, it's impossible, because our brain is a computer. It is designed to create programs and create neural pathways, and those pathways, those connections are imprinted. We can create new ones all the time, anytime we wish, and those old ones can fade away. And I've used this metaphor lots of times, like walking across a field of grass. The more you walk across it, the stronger the pathway gets. The minute you stop walking across it and you walk across another part of the grass, another part of the green field, you create a new pathway. And eventually that old pathway, the grass, grows up. But the pathway never disappears completely, because thinking doesn't just disappear. It doesn't just go away. There's always a ghost of it there. You can't get rid of your memories. There's always the ghost of it there in our brain. And that's why we can never really get rid of self-sabotage, because we'll always have those ghost pathways, those ghost neural networks in our brain that every now and again will show up. What happens is, over time, over time, you just become aware of what's going on. And you become less and less interested in that old way of thinking or feeling. You just become less interested in it. And the less interested you are in it, the less likely you'll act out any behaviours that were once associated with that self-sabotage. So I'm hoping this makes sense, guys. I'm looking to see if there's any comments in the feed. So please feel free to share anything that you want to share with me around this, any questions or, you know, anything at all. I mean, I'm not saying that what I'm saying is right. I'm just sharing with you my understanding of it and what I've seen, what I've experienced, and what I experience with clients and people I'm working with all the time. So, oh, you're all quiet. No questions. Okay. So, oh, Adrian's got one. Excellent. So Adrian's saying, should we not focus on why our brain is protecting us with the sabotage, trying to keep us safe, and just let the feelings come up and move them forward? So should we not focus on why our brain is protecting us with the sabotage, trying to keep us safe? And just, yeah, that's exactly what I would do, Adrian. So my focus, anytime I'm aware that I'm going back into self-sabotage mode, so maybe I have an idea about something or I want to go do something, and then I start self-sabotaging by, procrastination's a good one for me, putting things off and not getting it done. I just remind myself, oh, I'm just looking after myself here. You know, and sometimes I'll say things like, I must be stepping out my comfort zone if this is showing up for me. And I just allow the stuff to pass through me. You don't need to do anything. You know, you don't need to do anything at all. So you're absolutely right. You know, just allow the feelings to come through and for them to pass. You know, because the system, our system, is self-correcting. It's only when we try and meddle with it that we get stuck and make it worse. So, well done, Adrian. Yay. So Robert's saying, makes perfect sense. So self-sabotage often shows up as procrastination. Well, for me it does, Robert. You know, that's been a big way it's shown up for me over my lifetime. I can't speak for anyone else, but certainly, especially since I became self-employed, because a lot of the things that I've had to learn to do are new. You know, working for yourself brings on a whole new experience, and you're learning lots of new things, and you're being visible, and so there was a lot of new stuff there. So sometimes for me, how it would show up is rather than do that thing, I would put it off and put it off and put it off. So for me, that was a way that my own self-sabotage showed up. So I now interpret that as, that's just me taking care of me, you know, because I'm feeling a bit vulnerable, my thinking's a bit off, and I don't feel very safe. And if I just notice it and I don't push through and make myself do it, and I just do what occurs to me in that moment, then eventually it dissolves away and something else comes through. And I usually find I start doing the very things that I want to do. Yeah, so good. Any other questions? Or even questions, don't have to be to do with self-sabotage. If you've got anything else you want to ask, just pop it up in the newsfeed. Just seeing if anything else is coming up. I think once you start to connect with the idea that we're doing in every given moment is trying to keep ourselves safe, whether that's around self-sabotage or fears or doubts or beliefs, all of these things that we have inside our heads, you know, it's almost, I know they're annoying, and I know that most of us don't want to be having to deal with anxiety or depression or negative thinking or limiting beliefs or all of that stuff. We'd rather be free of it completely. But when we are in that space, which we all go into, you know, everybody does, it's part of the human experience, we cannot avoid it. You know, that's normal. What isn't normal is being upbeat and positive 100% of the time, because usually that's something that you're having to work at. So when we're having a normal human experience, and that normal human experience shows up as self-sabotage or doubt or whatever it might be in the moment, anxiety or even a panic attack, you know, just reminding ourselves that right now, all that's happening is that's a part of me just looking out for me, because I'm having some unhelpful thinking, or I'm adding unhelpful meaning to something that I'm experiencing right now. And if we can allow ourselves to be in a place of compassion like that, instead of thinking, oh, I need to fix myself all the time, every time, you know, I've got a negative thought, I must be a bad person, I need to go work on that. Or I've got a limiting belief, I must be a bad person, I need to go work on that. You know, that's just harsh. That's just a harsh way of treating ourselves. So if we can always find a way to kind of just step back into that awareness that at this moment in time, I'm doing the best I can with what I've got. And whether it's self-sabotage that's showing up, procrastination, or any of the stuff that I've mentioned, anxiety or fears, knowing that this is happening because we are taking care of ourselves, and this is the best way we know how to take care of ourselves right now. Just by doing that in and of itself allows us, or allows our mind, the opportunity to self-correct and reset itself. Because when we're in that space of that knowing, then we start to get clarity of mind. The mind clears and things settle down, and that's when the feelings dissolve away. It's like another metaphor I use is shaking a snow globe. You know, you keep shaking the snow globe. Oh, I've got self-sabotage, I've got self-sabotage, I've got self-sabotage. You keep shaking that snow globe, then there's always going to be snow in it, and you're not going to see the lovely picture, the lovely thing that's inside the snow globe. You know, I've got a couple with London and Paris. You know, if I keep shaking that, I'm not going to see the Eiffel Tower. I'm not going to see Big Ben. But if I leave it alone, eventually the snow inside the globe all settles to the bottom, and you can see clearly, you have clarity. And that's all we ever need to do, is we need to just stop shaking the snow globe to get that clarity, you know, and just let it settle. And when we let things settle in that way, when we have this awareness, oh, this is just self-sabotage is simply me protecting myself. And instead of going in there and, you know, doing And I'm not saying not to do whatever it is that you like to do to make yourself feel good. All I'm saying is that you don't need to. So if you don't go in there and start meddling with it and we'll leave it, then eventually it will settle. And that self-sabotage will just dissolve away to the bottom, and we'll start to see the clarity that we need in order to move forward. But when we're in the past and in the future, we're shaking the snow globe. And that's probably the best way for me to describe it. And Kirsten's saying it's so hard being kind to oneself. And yeah, I guess that is a hard thing for us to do when we have spent probably a great deal of our lives looking to the outside and judging ourselves based on what other people think of us, or other people's expectations, and all the shoulds and coulds. And then we go inside ourselves and judge ourselves because we're not measuring up to all that stuff outside ourselves. So yeah, I absolutely agree. It can be hard being kind to ourselves. But that being kind to ourselves can just be one simple shift in awareness, Kirsten. You know, that I'm doing the best I can right now with the resources I have right now, or with what I know right now. You know, it can just be that one simple shift, you know, of awareness. If you do something and you feel guilt or shame around it, just that reminding yourself, I'm doing the best I can right now, you know, and that just takes time, you know, and practice, and this awareness that you make your own rules. No one else is the rule maker but you. You make your own rules. Nobody else makes them for you except you. You're the one that decides internally whether you're this or that, you know. But all too often we've been conditioned into believing that the outside world determines that, but it doesn't. You know, I had a client, one of my clients yesterday, and she was talking about, oh, I always feel guilty because if the weather's nice, I should be going out and going for a walk, and I should be hanging up the washing, and, you know, I never do all these things that I should be doing. And my question was, who says you should be doing that? And my client said, well, I say I should be doing it. And I was like, so who's making the rules here? Who's making this rule? Where did that rule come from? You know, in that moment, my client had absolute clarity about what was going on, and that she was her own rule maker. No one tells us these rules to make up inside ourselves except us. And the rules that we make up inside ourselves are the rules from which we judge ourselves. So if you can make up the rules, you can also break them and rewrite the rules. You know, I know I'm doing this because I know it may not always appear as easy as that from wherever you're standing, but that is something that you can do at any time. Okay, oh, there's Avril Gibson. Hi, Avril. So, any other comments? Come on, guys. Any other comments or feedback that you would like to share? I'm going to go and give some likes. Whilst we see if someone else. Avril, how are you? Go, Avril. Hi, Veronica. Long time no see. How are you? It feels like ages. I hope you're well. Avril, I'm glad you're okay. I missed our Q&A last night. It felt weird not having our masterclass last night, Avril. I am working on a special recording to put in the group for you guys, because it just felt so strange Wednesday night, and I'm not doing my mastermind call. It was bizarre. So any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? If there's nothing else, I am going to give it a minute or so, because I know it can take a little while for people to type. But if there's not anything else, I will sign off shortly. So I hope this has been helpful and at least helped to give you a little bit insight into what's going on. And one of the things that I always like to remind people is that we have a brain, you know, and our brain is just like a computer. You know, it is going to take information in, it's going to use that information, and it's going to create programs. But we're not just our brain. We're something much, much more than our brain. You know, the brain's just the operating system. You know, there has to be something behind that operating system. You know, it's like me earlier trying to go live on Facebook. You know, it's not just the technical stuff here. There's something that has to be behind that technical stuff in order to make it all happen, you know, and that's where our inner wisdom comes from. That's where our innate truth, guidance, whatever you want to call it, you know, that's where our inner knowing resides, not inside the brain, but in this quantum field. And it's that comes through and guides us. You know, it'll keep coming through no matter what your brain does. You know, no matter how your brain stores and sorts information, your inner truth, your innate being, whatever, will keep coming through with insights, with ideas, with thought, with all sorts of things. It's what happens when it gets inside the brain that determines what the outcomes that you create. So when you can step back and understand how that all works, then your awareness of the whole system, the whole of being you, begins to shift and expand, so that you don't get caught up in your brain. You can just sit in this space, and the space of what I like to call awareness, you know, and just be in that space. So Adrian's just said, very helpful advice. So I'm glad you found it helpful, Adrian. I realise now I focus too much on the self. It's okay to focus on the self. It's when you get stuck in the meaning that you make of the self. But yeah, good. I'm really glad you found it helpful. So we're just at the 40 minutes mark, and if there's no other questions or no, oh, thanks, Avril, really helpful. Yeah, oh, good. Sorry, I'm reading this down in the feed and muttering away to myself. So you're welcome, Kirsten and Robert. Thanks for joining. I'm glad you found it helpful. Yeah, if there's no more questions, I'm just going to call it a day here and invite you to just allow this to percolate. Like I say, there's no right or wrong. It doesn't mean that, you know, I'm right, you're wrong, or you're wrong and I'm right, or whatever. This is just an insight. This is just an awareness that I'm sharing with you. And I say this to my students all the time. You don't have to believe a word I say. But just allow it to percolate. Just allow your little snow globe just to settle down until a little bit clarity comes through, and just observe what you notice. So thank you very much. I'm off to get some lunch, maybe take the dogs a walk, and unless I procrastinate, that is. And I'll see you next month. Don't forget to put up some questions for next month. Give me some stuff that I can work with, and I'll answer all your questions again next month. Bye for now. Bye.